Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I have Brian Smits, who's the Business Development Manager for Circularize. And Brian is part of a program with the company called Startup in Residence, which is, I think, an amazing type of incubator accelerator for startups to get commercial deals with the city of Amsterdam. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that. Myself, I'm a mentor with Startup in Residence, and that was the connection. I am really curious because I've read about Circularize online, and I have an idea of what circular economy could mean. But I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot more on this conversation. So Brian, welcome to the conversation. And can you please share with us, what is it that you as Brian do, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. First of all, thanks for giving us this spot on the podcast. My name is Brian. I work with Circularise for numerous years now, actually pretty much from the beginning. And I'm a business development manager there. Like I said, I got into the company quite early when we were still a bit smaller. We're now growing. I tend to look at businesses like we do in general as a company that have products in the chemical industry. That's where we take it from commercially. But now also looking at circularity from a public procurement perspective to see where we can help, for instance, in this case, the city of Amsterdam with their procurement questions about how do they measure what's circular or sustainable and what's not. And the reason I got into it is because I think circular economy is something that has a huge potential and is actually quite necessary when you look at the world and how materials are being sourced today. So we need something in place to basically figure out what we can do, where we're going to get the resources from if you want to sustain growth or even maintain a certain economic value for these materials in the future. So that's something I think is really important. And I also have young children, and I think also that for me to have something like this is really meaningful in order for them to have a good world to grow up in. And might sound very it feels like a mission sometimes, but that's also why it makes it so beautiful to work in this line of work.
Well, I think leaving the planet better off than we found it as a generation is certainly a mission, and a noble mission at that. So, I feel it.
Yeah.
Can you share, because you mentioned circular economy, and it's oftentimes called circularity as well. Can you describe what circular economy is for people that might not be familiar with the term, if there's anyone who's not familiar with the term, because it's getting more and more common?
Well, first of all, how I would describe it is that I think there are some metrics there that just give an indication of what's going on in the world at first. So also to put out there why it's important. And 90% of the resources that are basically being sourced from the ground, from the natural resources that we have, is not being recycled at the end of life. So when it goes through the whole production process, all these resources, they get put together as products, and then only 10% makes it back into a new product. And I think to get a global idea, like actually looking global, if you look at the world, it's something that has finite resources, and if you treat it like an infinite source, then sooner or later you're going to run out of those resources. So what a circular economy does, it's a very broad principle. We can look at it from different perspectives, but I guess it would also start with designing products that can be easily dismantled, that can be easily maintained or repaired or remanufactured, refurbished, all those steps you have within a circular economy. So you're going to prolong the life of a product as long as you can. You're going to make it easy to maintain or repair a product. And you're going to look at how can we best reuse the resources that are present in these products at the end of life. So at the end of life, you're going to make a decision like what's in these products. How can we reuse it? Is there a market for the materials used in this product that's easy to access? So a circular economy in looking at it from that perspective, you're going to look at it from design to the processes to the even to transport. So you're going to think about like can I locally source some of the materials that I need for these products instead of shipping them from halfway around the world. So it's a take on efficiency, but also taking into account the finite resources that we have on this planet and making sure that they can be reused over and over again so that we will never run out, which is practically an impossible mission, but at least to get it to a sustainable level where you can reuse all of these materials that are out there.
Getting to the sustainable level. So I think you said 90% of products are not circular, so linear, I guess, into the trash heap. What is the ambition? Meaning, what is the realistic percentage of circularity that you imagine we could achieve as a global population?
Realistically, I think this will take a lot of time because it also includes the awareness that you need to have with every individual living on this planet. So it's a tough question, but I think over time you can flip that coin and make it 90% reusable. If let's say we build a product here or somewhere else in the world and it gets shipped to another part in the world where people don't have a clue what to do with it and don't have, for instance, the infrastructure to process the materials that are present in these products, that's where you start having problems. So if those kind of processes internationally and standards develop, then you can definitely turn that around and also taking those design principles, which are becoming more common. So instead of gluing parts together, which is going to make it hard to reuse it at end of life, they're going to make it interchangeable so you can easily repair or at least replace parts in products. So I think there's a trend going on there, and there's very ambitious goals that have been set by, for instance, the Dutch government, which wants to be fully circular in a couple of decades. Which is really ambitious, but I think we need to set these ambitious goals in order to reach that.
Yeah, I think I read whether it was fully circular, but by like I think it's like a 2035 goal that they had some pretty ambitious targets, which was great. Which was great to see. So maybe a confrontational question. It sounds like a lot of these principles to enable circularity are almost in direct conflict with the traditional definition of capitalism, which is cheapest, fastest, planned obsolescence. I'm thinking of Apple here. I'm looking at you, Apple. The device of if you drop it once, it's broken and the whole thing is just destroyed. But they're making a ton of cash, and I'm not saying that Apple isn't sustainable at all. But I'm just mostly complaining because when my laptop breaks, I have to replace the whole thing. How do you imagine these dimensions colliding and working in harmony? Because there must be a way for organizations, I believe, to do well by doing good. How do you see that, I guess, evolving?
Yeah, I see it basically as something that's going to be initiated by, like, right now it's quite a niche market. So people actually do need to pay extra to get those sustainable products because it's not general practice for every company, like you said. But also I feel like governments actually have a very important role to play here. So looking at public procurement, they have a large budget to make a difference, let's say, if they actually measure or they take into accounting that they're not just going to buy the cheapest materials out there, but they're also going to take this into account, then you can actually give, how do you say it, like kickstarter to the circular economy, at least on the products that are going to be released on the market. And I hope companies take to this example. And I think also the way people look at it, there's going to be way more consumers that are actually thinking about this and taking into account that they want to pay a little bit extra for a better product. But I'm hoping it's going to be before actually resources from their as virgin materials become too expensive to be sustainable. So that's, you're going to be forced in the long run anyway. But I think until we get to that point, there's going to be a lot of companies realizing this already and also putting their products to market. And I think, like I said, right now it's a niche, but it's going to expand. So I think at least in countries where people have a lot of purchasing power, there's going to be a shift. And then hopefully it's going to follow around in the rest of the world in a couple of decades, because that's going to be what it has. It's going to take that. It's going to take some time.
Well, I'm thinking, because right now I'm working on sort of IT digital strategies with a bank, fashion brand, chemicals, sustainability and circularity by name are pretty common conversations in all of these organizations. I think some of them are a wee bit more authentic than others. I'll let you figure out which industry is probably more authentic there. And the conversation has started. So that, I think, is really positive. Looping back to Circularize, and your LinkedIn says you joined them, I think, in late 2017, which is roughly, around when it started, or shortly before that. Can you describe it's a standards, transparency type of platform. Can you describe what Circularize provides, and how are you contributing to this, I guess, global mission?
Yeah, I think actually what you talked about before is something that sheds a very good light on what we're trying to achieve, and that's about all this talk about sustainability and circularity. And the thing is that it's really hard to measure. It's really hard to keep track of what gets. Like, you have these supply chains that exist of so many tiers. So basically, to keep track of everything that's going on in the entire supply chain is a really tough challenge. There can become really expensive as well. So companies, there have been numerous cases where big companies, even, they put statements out there that they want to reach something by, let's say, 50% circular sourcing by 2025. And then if they're asked how are they going to do this, like, it's still just a big hype. It's like, we don't know yet, but we're going to do this. And also how once you get some circular practices into place, how are you going to measure what actually ends up with your customers, how they can see what actually has been performed, basically, in order for that product to be X amount circular or sustainable, or has a lesser amount of CO2 footprint than the other. So you want to give people a handle to make decisions on buying products, and to give them an idea of what's actually going on as far as circular or sustainable efforts go for the companies that they're buying from. And what we do is we devise software that is based on blockchain technology. And what we do is we make a digital twin of physical amounts being produced. So let's say a producer makes 10,000 kilograms of recycled, that exists from recycled feedstock. So you get recycled plastics, and they want to put this to market. It's going through this entire supply chain. We provide them with a way to actually provide the proof of how sustainable they are producing to their entire supply chain. And it eliminates basically most of the ways that there can be fraudulent business about that, and also gives the consumer a trustworthy idea of what they're purchasing is actually X amount circular or sustainable. So that's what we're facilitating by our product.
Fascinating. And let me dive a little bit deeper. So a digital twin, and somehow this digital twin needs to track and trace, because that that product or bundle of products that were manufactured are oftentimes then combined into other products and create new value, or they're split and sent in two different directions and combined in different things, and then So how do you keep your digital twin in sync with the physical reality? How do you do that? I can't even imagine.
Well, how we started out with that is on a mass balance claim, and I'll dive into it more. But there's technologies that you can combine with our tech in order of traceability, where you can make it virtually one-on-one. But for the sake of explaining the principle first, I'll start with the mass balance. So let's say somebody produces the 10,000 kilograms of recycled plastic I was just talking about, and they want to put it to market. And let's say they have a customer B that wants to buy 5,000 kilograms of this feedstock. They can transfer also. It's tokenization, basically. That's what happens on the blockchain. So we create 5,000 tokens, which is actually 5,000 kilograms of recycled plastics. They transfer it to their customer. And if their customer divides it up in smaller products, they can actually transfer these tokens to the smaller products. So they will be able to split these large amounts into smaller amounts and smaller amounts and smaller amounts. And you're going to be able, like if an end product only weighs, let's say 100 grams or has 100 grams of that plastic in there, you can at least trace that there's 100 grams that has been sold to the end customer, and that they actually bought recycled feedstock. So that's the proof that's added to there. And if you then look at it on a larger scale, you can do this for other materials that have been sourced as well. And then you would have a full picture of what's going on within an eventual product.
Cool. I love the way to do it. And my evil mind immediately goes into overdrive on how to hack the system. Is there an aftermarket, meaning a gray market of tokens? Because imagine a group buys that 1,000 kilos of recycled plastic feedstock. They sell it along the way, and then they sort of like greenwashing down some other path. How do you resolve that, or do you celebrate that? Because that could be actually a whole market in itself.
Well, I think the main takeaway from there is that you have, for instance, if you don't sell the kilograms you sell to a next party, and you actually want the added proof, which is going to, like we see with our customers, is actually an added value. So they get an upside on the price of their materials. They're going to sell the digital proof with it. So let's say they do not do that. They also don't get that upside. That's the idea behind it, right? So the proof actually has intrinsic value. And of course, they can swap the materials and sell the actual material in a different market without the proof, but that there will also lose its value. So that's just from a logical, economical perspective. But I do see where you're coming from, and the way this would work, there's lots of traceability solutions popping up as well. And we have been talking with a lot of them. We actually tested some of the technologies that are out there to see if we can combine them with our technology. And one of the things is, like, for instance, you have tracers out there that work with certain aspects. They can be added to the material, and you can also always trace it back to that original material. So then you will be basically combining the DNA of a material with a birth certificate. And as long as you have both, you can, if you would look at a person, you can basically say, okay, this is your DNA. It's linked to this birth certificate. I can actually know it's you. So that will basically, that combination would be the ultimate proof if you would have that in any case. So now looking at a mass balance perspective that we're already doing out there, it already brings some certainty to people that are linked to Circularize in the network, that are actually receiving and sending out the proof as we currently do with the mass balance system. But looking into the future, we would foresee that at least for some materials to start with, you're going to see that you can actually trace the material itself. You will find basically a digital or a chemical fingerprint on the product, and you can link it to the tokens that have been created on the blockchain system.
Cool. And blockchain, why blockchain? Whenever I have, and I'm just legitimately curious about this. Blockchain, in my experience, can be a very inefficient way of running a database. Does it add unique value here? I imagine as these tokens go party to party and you need some sort of intrinsic trust, that would make sense. And that's a use case that I can see. But why the blockchain decision in the architecture?
That came from actually making, we were looking at what was actually the obstacles in the markets we were looking at when Circularize was first exploring and validating their proposition. And we were looking at, for instance, what's one of the things that needs to be there in order to enable having trust in the system. And if you would have like a smaller scale database that would run on a central authority, then basically you would always have a single point where somebody could say, like, okay, we've seen this, it's trustworthy, but they would still need to trust this central authority in there. While using this system, you're going to have a ledger that's basically permissionless. And it's going to state that once there's only one point of entry where you need the trust. It's where, for instance, when an auditor says like, okay, I've seen this material, it's actually X amount circular or sustainable or whatever kind of claim you want to add to that. And from that moment on, you can just transfer these tokens. They can also, that's one of the things, the upside of the blockchain there, is that they do not exist at one point at the same time. So you can only spend that 5,000 tokens representing that material once.
Yeah.
And the thing we see is that within the current supply chains, you see a lot of, for instance, there's a certification for 10,000 kilograms, but it gets sold 5 times on the market, or there's weird claims going on, or there's weird practices going on. And that's actually one of the aspects that we introduced blockchain technology in order to eliminate that part.
I see it. No, super cool. I'm enjoying this. The customers of this, and you mentioned earlier, before we started our podcast conversation, that there's some pilots and things that are still under NDA that you can't talk about that. But I did read on your website that there's some programs with Porsche and some other sort of really well-known brands like that. So how would you describe the imaginary perfect customer for you? And do you have a few case studies to help people sort of put it in their mind on who would use this to its fullest? Well, in the current situation, it's mainly manufacturers of sustainable materials. So if they actually think they have an edge on the competition by making claims on how sustainable or how circular a product already is, that's the people that are already basically in line for a good product to have that proof being transferred down the value chain so that people actually know what they're buying. Mm-hmm. Looking at the pilots, for instance, with Porsche, it's great for them to have an initiative like this. And it's great for us to have an opportunity to work with a really, really big brand like that. Because looking at our ideal situation is where we know we have a manufacturer that is producing really well sustainable materials, and then on the other end you have a brand that really wants to have that proof and really wants to communicate to their customers like how well they are doing. And this made it really interesting for us in that particular scenario. So if you could repeat that with different manufacturers and different brands, that's the ultimate goal there. Just bringing transparency to their markets and communicating it to their end customers. That in our mind is quite beautiful already. So. And your role as business development manager, I imagine that these days is quite easy then. The phone is probably ringing off the hooks and orders are coming in, or is this more still a bit of a hard sell? How ready is the market for this?
Well, for instance, you were just talking about blockchain, and that's one of the first things that people also think like when incorporating this into their day-to-day business, like what's that going to look like? What's it going to mean for us? And so there's some initial speed bumps basically in the thought process of people. But I see once we take those away, we can actually start working on implementing that into their into a pilot case where we can showcase what it can do for them, and then from there, getting it into a recurring phase where they start using the product. And well, the phone is ringing, but it takes some time for us to basically adapt it to each customer, their expectations, to their desires, and it's not something that's right now off the shelf, ready to use. So it's still a bit customizable. We're working on getting it more into a plug and play client kind of product, so that people can start using it with a lower barrier even. Yeah, but we're getting there step by step, and also like the processes with these large companies, they just take a little bit longer, and it's all for good reasons. But that's why we're working immediately with some bigger clients, which makes sense for us as well, which makes the cycles just a lot longer. But it's good fun, and we don't have to sit still. We're not waiting for the phone to ring.
Good. And what does the implementation look like? Meaning, are they actually, do they need to provide, I guess, computational power on the chain, or is this something they just log into a portal and update stuff, or how deep and tight is this?
I guess the second one, like they don't have to run a node or anything. That's not part of what we work on a public blockchain. So that's something that's not something that they need to participate in. So it's basically a web app where they're going to start to use the product initially, and then of course, like you also said, like it's also part of the physical process. So you need to look at what's behind the data that's going into our system, and there for now, at least at this point, is the most work that needs to be done. Like looking, what does their process look like? Who's auditing the materials? How are we going to implement our system into their day-to-day work? And I guess it's just one more technical step away for us to get it fully up and running with a quicker cycle like that. So we're working on speeding up that process.
Yeah, I imagine if you roll forward a couple of years, there must be, and I'm going to get really abstract here, so slap me if I go too far down the rabbit hole, but that there would be some sort of integration with the ERP systems that, as the businesses are making their orders and their bills of materials are going through their production processes, that somehow there would be a track and trace along the way. And God forbid, I think you might not be the only solution like this. So there must be some sort of interchangeability or handoff where, okay, this token has come through and it needs to be translated to some other type of format in order to sort of maintain its integrity. So what's the big picture on this? And once that's there, wow, I think the insights, not only for the consumer, but also for the producers and the businesses themselves, the insights will be incredibly valuable. That's a good thing you bring that up, because one of the things we were looking at when designing our product and how we're going to go about this and how can you actually enable that adoption is one of the things we were looking at is we're going to have at least part of the protocol that's behind the system. We're going to open source that. So we want to be able to work together with the industry to set a standard. And then open source that, so even competitors can pop up. But mostly we're looking at how can you enable an ecosystem where, for instance, different companies making different applications can work with the same standard in order to get a widespread adoption and that everybody can start using that. So we don't have the illusion that we can do everything ourselves. We're also a startup, and we take after a couple of niche markets, but we try to establish something that is bigger. Because if you get silos within the circular economy and within the data flow that's behind that's going to be bad in our opinion. So that's a strategy we chose for. In my limited experience in these topics, what I also find is oftentimes the supply chain itself isn't well enough managed. They don't have insights in it. So already just the audit or the traceability of the supply chain, sustainable or not, is incredibly valuable. And then once you have that under control on a consistent and quality basis, then you can start making really intelligent decisions about where to focus your sustainability efforts. So there's No, really, really amazing stuff. So we have a bit of time for a few more questions. I'm curious. What was I curious about? Damn it. Plastics. You mentioned something about niche markets. And I read on the website, again, that is at Circularize. And for everyone on half of my life that are American, it's not spelled your way. It's spelled Circularize with an SE at the end, .com. Yeah. I'm curious what the other Circularize, there must be someone else, but this is Circularize with an SE.com. And under the industries, you have plastics, but are you forking into other industries or product lines as well?
Yes, also before we took a main turn towards plastics, I think we also look, and that's something that overlaps, of course. So you look at plastics as the basis of some textile materials as well. So there's some interest there in that market, but also chemically based. Like for instance, you mentioned the Startup in Residence program. We're there focusing on building materials, and that's a niche market, but there's a lot of attention coming there from the Dutch procurement side. So they set out with this question in the Startup in Residence challenges, and we've been working on this for, I think, a year and a half now, in order to map circularity within infrastructure and built environment. So that's also something we're well looking into, and looking into that market is giant material streams, and there's challenges there that we thought like it resembles or it is actually quite similar to the challenges we have within the plastics industry, and I was definitely keen to take on that challenge. So that's why we're also venturing into the built environment, but all is related basically right now to chemicals, and that's where we get the main traction.
Can you share a few words on, maybe in your own words, describe the Startup in Residence program and why you invest in that program, and why you think they're investing in you as a startup? And I'm curious how you describe it, and then I'll fill in the blanks from my perspective as well, because I think it's an outstanding program. Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, they get different challenges. They select certain startups to meet those challenges and to take part in the program. And the program is actually it's set up beautifully. So the organization is really well and keeps you on point. But they also make sure that through these common chapters that you walk through with all of the other startups, you get basically the same idea of where you're going. Together with the projects individually coming from the municipality, so you go through a joint section, but also you get the progress. It just gets flowing through that. So you get upon these topics that are going to help you throughout the challenge, but also make you better as an entrepreneur itself. So there were a lot of topics in there that I was like, I haven't really thought about it before. So that was, for my personal development, was really good to partake in, but also looking at the general goal in order to meet the challenges that they set out with. It facilitates really well, and the like I said, the quality of the program in general is really good. Trainers and mentors as well. And,
the mentors are fantastic, aren't they? The mentors are incredible.
They are definitely. No, I think that it's for me, it was a really good experience to get into, because I do have to say, like, it's sort of an acceleration program as well, right? You get really quickly boosted into that, and I didn't partake in any myself before, so this was a really good introduction for me.
Well, to add one thing to that description, and I would underline everything that you've said. I've heard that from other people as well. Is I think the genius of the program is it's not a traditional accelerator or boot camp. It's actually a procurement process. And so they took an otherwise bureaucratic procurement process, working with a city, and every city's like that. These are public entities, so that's not really a criticism. However, they have then taken the requirements of a procurement process, streamlined that, and then took these cases, these use cases, customer needs from inside the city, connect it to startups, put a program around it to match the startup capability with the actual need, but basically a 6-month program, in order to prove the case enough. And then if all parties are satisfied, then there is an opportunity for an actual commercial deal between the startup and the city. And that's the payoff. And so it's not equity based or, just giving money away or loan based. It's actually, let's spend some time together, let's get some support together. And the goal is to create value between the city and the startup. And I think that purposefulness of the aim to create value and sustainable value, meaning business sustainable value, is I just immediately fell in love with it. And that's also why I participate and give my time, and also celebrate it on the podcast and learn from amazing people like you. So
I totally agree. I think that's one of the things about this is that it's like you said, like if it's, for instance, if it's the goal is to get to an equity deal, for instance, just to get funding for your company, but to get on this scale, actually work towards some commercial deal is actually adding value right away, which is going to be good for the city to experience these innovations, but also for the companies there itself to create value for the company right away. And I do think the emphasis is sometimes a little bit too much on valuation and getting those investments in, instead of just getting your solution out there and actually providing real value right away. And I think that's a beautiful balance they have there.
Beautiful balance. I totally agree with that. So, Brian Smits, thank you so much for joining. This has been educational for me, and journey of discovery deeper into the circular economy. I love that there's a use case that I can point to around blockchain that is actually adding value other than marketing buzz value. So I can see how that adds here. And for those of you who might be working for a manufacturer of sustainable chemical-based products, then reach out to Brian on LinkedIn, and his LinkedIn profile will be on the show notes, or you can go to Circularize with an SE at the end.com and learn more about it. So Brian, thank you so much for joining. I've really appreciated it.
Chris, thank you as well. Really enjoyed it as well. And thanks for setting this up.
Learn more at ebullient.com/podcast.